everybody. I've heard amazing things from everyone who has spoken here. Like she said, my name is Blessing. And before I go into what the African government can really do in terms of collaboration with civil societies, it's important that I stress that I, as a person, as an African, I haven't seen enough of social justice being implemented in many of our African nations. We see that this is 2024 and we're still having discussions concerning subjugation of women, female genital mutilation. There are still conversations around illiteracy. You know, growing up, because of where I grew up, I just didn't have it at the back of my mind that there were still people in my country that were illiterate until we had someone from my dad's village come over to our house and realized, oh, she couldn't write or read, and she was 25 at that time. And it was shocking for me. And these are one of the things that I saw within the society that led me into the area of social justice, which I've been serving in right from when I was in like my second year in the university. We need to understand that there are intersectional and intergenerational consequences when we don't take social justice serious. Because what this will mean is that certain social and basic amenities that are meant to be widely and generally distributed amongst all persons, regardless of their race, their tribes, their financial status, will now only be a resource for the rich. And what you now see is that everybody wants to get rich by whatever means. And that's what we've been seeing in the African population, and particularly in my country, Nigeria. I was at the African Summit, just in African Social Impact Summit in July. And they said something that I realized is now like a widespread saying. They said by 2050, 1 in every 4 persons would be African. And if we're going to start having conversations about the future, Africans cannot just afford to be exempted from the conversation. So it's not just for us to be part of the conversation, we must also take that decision to be at the forefront in its implementation. And so if you ask me how we can collaborate with African governments to be able to protect vulnerable persons, people like women and children and persons with disability, one thing I would say is that African government, I know that we have certain representatives of the African government here. We need to prioritize social justice. In my country, Nigeria, as a lawyer, something that annoyed me while I was studying was I realized that if you look at our constitution, which as lawyers we call the ground norm of the ground norm of the society, the ground norm of laws, every other law must take is its legality from the constitution. We see that in the Nigerian Constitution, Section 2, which provides for fundamental objectives of state policy, relationship between the government and the people, that's where you have the right to education, that's where you have the right to good environment, that's where you have the right to everything that you think the government is supposed to give to you as a citizen of a democratic state. You now go to Section 66D of the Constitution, 66C, I mean, and it's now stated there that the court does not have the right to implement any actions on this particular right. So I can't sue the Nigerian government for not providing me good education. And so that's why we see that they do all these things that they do without looking back, because these rights are called non-actionable rights and non-justiciable rights. Now that is a problem. So in terms of African government needs to show intentionality. They need to prioritize social justice as a thing to implement going forward, because Dr. Nelson, I'm so sorry. Like Dr. Nelson rightly explained, we cannot afford to miss the conversations going forward. We've missed a lot in time past. So how can we collaborate? It's important that when laws are made, there are two parts to making a law, right? We've seen that what we've seen in most African governments, I can speak for Nigeria, when there is an issue, we say, okay, let's make a law about it. And they don't do normal, they don't take statistics from the community. What we just do is, oh, where is this law? Where does this law exist in another country? We pick it up and then we bring it down and then we just pass it as a law. There is I've been in Canada for close to a year, and I've seen times where they would come, I'll check my sister's mailbox, and I will see surveys that the government is taking from the people in the society, so that when they make decisions, it aligns with the people. So they can work with civil societies to be able to get surveys that they have collected. Because I know as a civil society founder, I know that we do a lot of survey taking, right? And most times we are looking for, okay, what do we do next after we have these surveys? They can work with us, and then we get these surveys from the communities, and then give it to you, and then you do what you need to do in terms of lawmaking. And secondly, after the law has been passed, civil societies are like the gap in between the government and the people. We reach the grassroots level faster. So you can have us go and educate the people. I remember I worked with a female genital mutilation organization. I think that was 2022. Now, the female genital mutilation law was passed in 2015, but as of 2022, it was still happening because these people are in the villages. That's where you have the traditional birth attendants, and they did not know that there was such a law. So we had to go there, speak to them in Igbo, and tell them, this is the law. And then we realized that there was a problem. The problem is not enough to pass laws. It's also, you have to identify what makes these people continue in these devious practices. And we realized that the women, the traditional birth attendants, were saying, if you take away our source of livelihoods, what are we going to be doing? And so that's when we had to invest in agriculture and tell them, okay, we're going to help you. We're going to give you seeds, give you the tools you need. Another thing we can do is encourage active participation of the youth. When I didn't start Buluzo Foundation as a foundation. I started it as an initiative. I went to buy menstrual pads one day, and I saw that it was 1,000. And I know that they said, is it over 50% of Nigerians live below $1 a day? And that's like less than 1,000 naira. And I was saying, okay, that means if this is one person's food for a day, then that means those people would be having issues purchasing menstrual products. And then I called my friends and said, would you like to join me in this particular thing? Let's advocate for this. And then we ended up through calling for donations, from individual donations. We raised 996,000 naira that we used to help girls in local communities with menstrual pads. So we need to encourage youthful participation and youthful conversations. I saw an old video of, I don't know how many of us have seen it, but his name is Boniface Ofokaja, right? It's an old video that I saw of him where it was like a high school debate that held in New York in 1957. I haven't seen that thing in my lifetime, right? I'm still young. But this is something that Africa used to do before that we stopped. Getting young people to sit on the table and have conversations about governance, policy, and education, and about growth of the environment. I'm not talking about young people our age. I'm talking about high school young people. And we can see on the internet, we can see that it is showing, because young people, teenagers have a lot of strength, and they're looking for where to expend that strength. So if we do not create such platforms whereby they can sit on a table and have intellectual debates, not just saying, good morning, my co-debaters, not that type, like proper intellectual debates, which is something that CSOs can, make these platforms available. I like what the multidimensional artist said. I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry. But he said something. He said, if you don't have a platform, create a platform. And one thing I try to do as a CSO founder, and I've worked with certain government officials in the past on it, is that I get young people to volunteer, and I train them on what they need to know about their society. Like the last time we were invited by Nigerian Society of the Blind, and then the UNFPA, like young YPP. I can't remember what the full name means. And so I was in Canada. I didn't have anyone to take. And then I had young volunteers, 18 and 19 years old. I can remember their ages very well. I trained them on how to have conversations, how to speak publicly, and I sent them to that event. Until today, one of them now volunteers for Yali Network, and then the other one is doing so well. So I realized that there was a switch in the way they began to think. I educated them on SDG goals, which I did a training last week for my volunteers as well on SDG goals. Because if you don't encourage this participation, you're just going to realize that young people around you will focus on something else. That's why we're seeing the rise of baddies, on the internet talking about selling their bodies. So we need to encourage that participation and that interest, because interest is usually honed around the teenage years. So by the time we begin to encourage young people to have this interest in solving global problems, we'll see that there is a change. Another thing another strategy that I have employed in my work is that, sorry, I'll round up now. Another strategy I've employed in my work is that I always try to, when volunteers reach out to me from other places, I don't tell them you have to travel down to Lagos. I tell them, what is the problem in your society? I'm going to train you on how you can solve it. Gather a group of young people around you and let's solve it together. And that's how we've been able to work in Abia State, in Plateau State, in Lagos State. And lastly, one thing I would say is that governments in Africa need to understand the importance of using unifying languages, right? Diverse, inclusive languages. I remember what happened in Nigeria, just the 2023 elections, whereby certain statements made by certain people in positions of power disenfranchised a certain tribe. Not only disenfranchising them, it now created a rift whereby in other sections, these people's names were removed from certain opportunities because statements were made. So African leaders need to understand that it is very important that when making statements, because of your position of power, you need to be careful and be very conscious of using a unifying language. And the last one I would say is that we need to also talk and speak with international bodies, because I have noticed that when they speak with our African leaders, they kind of speak with them with an European and Western lens, as opposed to African lens. We have problems that are at the forefront. For instance, we're yet to have education. We are yet to, certain times, see women in certain positions of power. We're yet to realize that, okay, we need to create accessible roads for persons with disabilities. We have problems that I believe that international organizations should be putting forward to our leaders, as opposed to Western problems that they put forward to our leaders. Not that those Western problems are not important, but that we need to focus on what is important to Africa when speaking to African leaders. I hope I've been able to answer the question, but this is what I have on how we can foster collaboration. Thank you.